Welcome to We Need to Talk, where we discuss how to find meaning in life and how to reduce unnecessary suffering and dissatisfaction. In this episode, we're talking about what the greatest lesson is so far that we've learned in life. One of our answers is discipline, because discipline enables you to keep the chaos of life at bay and set up a routine that enables you to be productive over consistent long periods of time, which then consequently gives you access to the compound effect, which then leads on to enormous rewards over long periods of time. And the second tip is, or the second lesson is, be humble, because if you're humble, people will like you, they will root for you, give you opportunities, and that's also an especially potent tip for networking. So enjoy the episode and don't forget to subscribe. Let's go.
All
Thanks,
right.
Karen.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to We Need to Talk. This channel is dedicated to figuring out how to find meaning in life and how to reduce dissatisfaction and suffering. Today, I'm joined with Lorenzo. Lorenzo, we have a long history. We essentially did our bachelor's and master's degree together. Hours in the library, bad lectures, and a lot of fun. So Lorenzo, do you want to quickly introduce yourself? Anything you think is important that you'd like the listener to know?
Let me see. I mean, yeah, I think you kind of covered the relationship that we have already. I mean, as a kind of background, basically now I've been working on my own thing, so not kind of going to the job market, trying to build my own thing, see how fulfilling that is, and then make sure that that works, because it seems like that's, from my side, really the only route that I think is most fulfilling. So that's what we're now doing. We'll have a little team that we've put together, and hopefully, things go through and we can build a business that's under our name and not something that we're building for somebody else. And that's probably key to my philosophy, at least for now.
Nice. Do you want to say anything about what you're doing, or?
Yeah. So it's in the traditional terms, financial services. So basically what we're doing is we're acquiring businesses that basically provide advice to people looking to, let's say, acquire or buy a house, or if they want to retire, let's say, by X number of years, right? So they kind of have these goals. Then these businesses that we're now buying, they provide advice to those clients. So they'll tell them, well, you need to save X amount per year. You need to make sure that you're not spending too much on your car. You don't go, 2, 3, 4 times per year to your holiday destinations, et cetera, whatever it is. And then make sure that everything is tax efficient, that you're saving the right amount, and all the boring stuff that you don't want to do, that's being taken care of by these financial advisors.
Nice. Awesome. Dope. Okay. So yeah, I forgot to quickly say I'm Henry. I'm the host of this channel. Let's continue. One thing, Lorenzo and I, we've spent hours and hours just talking about deep topics during lunch throughout the 4 years. Like, if you'd calculate how many hours we spent, it'd be a lot. So we've covered a lot, and Lorenzo was sort of my intellectual sparring partner for 4 years. So he brought me a lot of value, which is really awesome. So the first question I think that would be nice to start off is what is the greatest lesson or greatest wisdom you've learned so far in life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the greatest lesson that, I mean, this is on a personal basis, right? So that's for me personally.
Yep.
Yeah. I would say is understanding that discipline, even though initially you don't think is freedom, is actually freedom. So this is something that Henry and I we've discussed in those numerous lunch discussions that we've had. That actually, when you realize that in a world where there's so much chaos already, if you have some kind of support, some kind of something that you can cling on to, and that is kind of a pattern, is a structure, that you have that structure in life, that's very freeing, right? So knowing and having the discipline in life is probably, that's being kind of a turning point. So that was something that in my case, I developed going to uni, meeting people like you, but you realize that when you have that discipline, you are able to get things, more things done. You're able to be in a more stable environment. You don't have the problems that some of the things that we've heard people tell us in terms of problems, like, well, I didn't study for this because I didn't have the discipline to study for this exam or whatever it may be, so I'm failing now. I need to and then they go out and drink or party, and so it kind of goes into this vicious cycle rather. So having the order within the chaotic world has been probably the biggest takeaway, at least in the last few years, for sure.
So you kind of decluttering the noise to allow yourself to really focus on ambitious, awesome goals, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that basically means having a clear vision, yes, but having a consistent, stable environment to make sure that you're going to reach that ambitious goal, whatever it may be, right?
Mm. And
Um,
do you have examples of
yeah.
what that discipline might look like?
So for me, what works well is waking up on time, having the same morning routine, right? It's kind of like almost a routine. So if you have the same regular routine, you know that the things that you want to achieve, you're going to almost automatically do them, right? So if the night before you say, let's say for the next year, every night before you go to bed, you write a list of things that you want to do for the next day. Automatically, once you have that routine, when you develop that, you're going to, without even thinking, at a point, you're going to start doing it naturally, right? You're going to start writing down those things you want to do the next day, and you're going to do them. So having that discipline to keep that up for a year is going to have drastic effects on achieving what you want to achieve, right? So that's, yeah.
It's kind of I like when you said you build this bubble of order in this chaotic world. It's also that example of writing out a list the night before for the following day. Is there's also chaos in your mind, and you're kind of restraining the sort of the, how would you say, kind of lazy, confused, natural mindset to this sort of clarity. Like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this at this time. And then, because if you just, wake up in the morning with no idea of what you're going to do, you sort of mess around a bit here. You waste time here, and you really don't get much done. But if you sort of write out an orderly plan, you just kind of like, you're just guiding yourself, really,
Mm-hmm.
I think.
And just one other point I want to add with that, because part of, and I think what the discipline translates into is that there's consistency. So if you need, well, actually, part of the discipline is to be consistent for a number of years, really. So if you do the kind of writing out your goals, or your what you want to do the next day, for a week, you're not going, it's not, that's not, there's no element of discipline, there's no element of consistency, so that's not going to have results that you want to achieve, right? That's not going to happen. But you do that for 2-3 years, you're going to have massive results, right? You're going to see much more drastically the changes that you otherwise wouldn't have seen had you not done those things, right?
And what's the phenomenon we're talking about here over time?
Yeah, so this is my favorite expression. I don't even know if it's a real term, but it's what I refer to as exponentiality. So that means basically, as you do these things, the kind of the results accumulate on top of each other, and then over a 2-3 year period, you're going to see massive results, whereas over a 2-3 week period, you're not going to see that proportion of results, right? So
And what's the key takeaway of this exponentiality, this compound effect? Like, what's the sort of, do you know what I mean?
yeah, I mean, it's time, right? That's the only
Yeah.
thing that's the biggest, let's say, influencer over that concept of compound interest, is I think we, Henry and I, we did this calculator where we saw if you start with, let's say you want to, and this is kind of financial advice related, but if you want to end up with 10 million pounds, you need to, let's say you want to start with 1 million, you need to save X amount per year, right? The starting with 1 million or starting with zero has little effect on the amount you need to save per year over a long time frame. So what I'm saying is what you start with is nowhere near as important as the time that you're committed to being disciplined. So you can basically be Einstein right now, i.e., you start with £1 million. If you're not consistent with your discipline for many, many years, you're still not going to achieve the goals or the 10 million that you want to save up for, right? Or you can start with zero, i.e., you're a student, you don't really know what you're doing, but you're disciplined and consistent for a long period of time. You're going to outperform Einstein, who wasn't consistent for those years because you took advantage of the time, right?
Right.
Does that make
And
sense?
yeah, exactly. It's the power of compound interest is in the time frame that you let it exist, or you're consistent with your discipline. But also what's awesome is the key takeaway is, well, okay, the average, I don't know how old people get on average nowadays, but we all have about, let's say, 70 to 80 years at the moment, maybe 90 for some people. So how do we take advantage of our limited time? Start as early as possible, because then you have the ability to take advantage, or let's say experience the longest time frame possible of this discipline, or investing in some, I don't know, in a trading account or whatever. Then you can take advantage of it. Whereas if you only start when you're 50, you only have 20-30 years left. But if you start when you're 20, you have like 60 years left.
Yeah. And it basically, this compound interest thing basically shows it doesn't matter what you're starting with. What matters is how long you're, let's say, invested in this discipline, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
Mm. If we draw this into, what does this have to do with meaning in life? I think I want to hear what you think about this. What I've realized, when you're disciplined and you have a track record of performance, you feel good about yourself. But if you're slacking and you've been lazy and unproductive, you feel bad about yourself. Do you experience that?
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty common, right? Most people, and I can kind of relate most easily to students. But if you know you're slacking, you're going to automatically feel worse than if you know you're slowly progressing towards your goal, right? Whether it's passing this exam or whatever it may be, starting your business. I think that's yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's an obvious thing, but it's not an easy thing to solve, because so many people, I mean, you have this force of laziness and almost self-loathing, a natural kind of self-loathing, that is this force that's pressing down on you and preventing you from being disciplined and productive. And then that just translates again into more, you know maybe kind of a shame, because you think like, I'm useless, I'm not doing anything with my life, and then that just spirals. You have this cycle again going on. So it's an obvious thing, but it's not a simple thing.
Yeah, and I think that relates quite heavily to the chaos and order. And I don't know if chaos and order kind of relates to religion, but that's not the direction that I want to go into for, well, maybe we can talk about that afterwards. But it's making sure that if you are in that state where you're kind of like trending downwards, that you try and order your life, you remove the chaos, and hopefully that kind of triggers this upward cycle. And not the I think that probably the turning point is if you've got more chaos than order, or at least a proportion of more chaos than order in your life, you're going to have the tendency of trending downwards, right?
Yeah, the chaos. It's kind of like this. I got it now. The chaos is always there outside. It's always there. And the sort of laziness or self-loathing is also always there. Now, you need to basically create this bubble to prevent the chaos and the self-loathing just crushing you. Because the self-loathing, like that's, let's say, let's put it like this. You're able to mediate the chaos quite simply, I would say, whereas the self-loathing, that's quite a psychological thing. And if they accumulate on top of each other, the chaos and the self-loathing, is just like it's just a lot harder. It doesn't have to be that hard, you know. And the key here is there to just to keep the chaotic confusion at bay, you know, just to give yourself a chance at even finding some sort of way to live without, you know, complete confusion and sort of, yeah, do you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah. So you mean when you say self-loathing, I mean, it sounds like the chaos that you're talking about is external chaos, and then the self-loathing is like the internal chaos
Yes.
that you might have, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's yeah, yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Let's go to the next question. Oh no, actually, once you, I came up with my own answers and I want to hear what you think about them. So
Hmm.
to the question, what is the greatest lesson or wisdom you've learned so far in your life? For me, it's been, one of them is seek discomfort. I think that's getting out of your comfort zone never fails to never fails to make you grow. When you grow, you feel positive emotions and you feel good about yourself, and that's a kind of way to restrain this shame, self-shaming, I would say. But also, that's quite an, like, there's not much to that, I think, the seeking discomfort. But one thing I want to hear what your opinion on. The other thing I found, which has been the best lessons in life, is be humble and listen to people. And let me explain why. When you portray humility and you listen to people, people will root for you and they will give you opportunities and they'll reward you. And the reason why I say, yeah, okay, but why is that so, like, okay, you know, it's, you know, if they root for you, whatever, but people rarely genuinely root for you. I don't know if you've reflected on it, but, you know, as soon as, let's say, you have two people and, no, let's say like this, people will root for you as long as they're above you. Do you know what I mean? As soon as you're starting to threaten them, they're like, no, you're going too far now. But I think if you act out this humility and this, you listen to people, or let me extend it. It's humility, listening to people, uh, be ethically switched on in your conversations. So show that you want to find a solution that helps others also find a win-win situation. And you're critical. Wait, I wrote it down. And you're curious, you're inquisitive, you want to learn. People will really, they'll like give you advice, they'll give you opportunities, and they'll want you in their network, kind of. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Um, and Henry, I don't know if maybe your listeners want a practical example. But you said when somebody's above you, I don't know in what hierarchy, but whether it's economical or social or whatever it is, they'll root for you. But if you're starting to threaten them, then they might turn a little bit against you, right? And I don't know if I don't know if I think once you mentioned with your parents or something, or in my case as well, if you start to not surpass your parents, but if you're, let's say, wherever your parents have been when you were 22, 23, 24, whatever the age may be, and you're kind of surpassing that, and I don't know if that's just the case with my parents, but there's almost this, not a resentment, but it's like, oh wow, I'm being beaten, right? I'm being in an indirect way. And so initially what I saw, actually, there was almost kind of this resistance of, well, we don't want, or let's say from maybe from my mom, I don't want him to, and it was obviously very subconscious, but I don't want him to win too much. It's like, Lorenzo, you should take a break. Don't work too hard. Don't, that kind of thing. And I think that that's what you were kind of referring to, right? Because whereas if had I been more humble with what I was doing, maybe that wouldn't have been the case. I don't know.
Yeah, that's super interesting because I think the parent-child dynamic is a bit different again. I wonder. Let's do. I mean, if you're happy, if you're okay with it, let's just dive into that. Like, I think if parents, what if? Okay, you'd say okay. The motivation is the person above, the parent, does not want the child to surpass them because of ego. Because they're like, oh, they're better than me. Is that it?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's quite clear that parents obviously want their kids to win, to be better than them. But it's like, let's imagine, or even a friendship, right? Like you and I, we're in uni, we're peers. Let's say, okay, blah blah, we're going through uni. You start rising the economic and social hierarchy, and obviously that's going to make me feel like, okay, I need to either step up my game. I need to start doing something more meaningful, right, within this whatever is possible. And I think there's almost naturally going to be that kind of tendency, right? I think everybody can relate. If they don't think, maybe they're lying to themselves, who knows? But I think that there would be almost certainly that kind of feeling,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, I mean, I can do like if you got a better grade than me, like in our finance course, I definitely had like, damn, like I wish I had that grade, or that's for sure there. But the question is, like, I think it's quite unequivocal. We can say, there's very, very often if you start to threaten somebody's position or their, let's say, their ranks in the hierarchy, as in either you destabilize them or you're rising above them, they won't like it. But what's the strategy to reduce the risk of them disliking it? And I think the strategy is be humble and show that you are genuinely you have genuine intentions to find win-win situations for everybody, because then it's not like necessarily a selfish thing that they'll think, okay, well, this guy or this girl is acting also in my favor, hence, or maybe it is that, because they'll be voting you up. So people get voted up in hierarchies by the people below them, and you ask, well, what are they doing that enables them to be voted up? And I think it's that they act out some sort of special behavior. But what is that behavior?
So in your case, you think it's that humility and creating win-win situations for people around them, and so they kind of elevate everybody, right? That's what you're referring to.
Yes.
Uh-huh. I mean, if we look at the opposite of what you're saying, so somebody who's winning but who's extremely arrogant, um, kind of wins at the expense of other people, then obviously I think that that's clear that nobody would root for somebody like that, right? So if you're playing Monopoly, I was playing Monopoly the other night, and I dominated the game, and I was acting kind of arrogant about it, right? So then all the people around you, well, I noticed very quickly, they don't want to play anymore, right? And so that's right. That's a tangible example. You don't want to be in a situation like that. And I think, like you said, the solution is probably that humility. Had I been humble dominating the Monopoly game, I might have been able to play for longer and won to a greater extent, right? So,
Dude, I could totally imagine you like really enjoying that. uh, but yeah, it's not I mean, the humility is important because you're not you're not you're not shoving it in their face, the fact that they're losing. That's one thing. But it's also, there's something about that trait of humility is like, if you're humble, you embody a trait that helps humanity as a whole. Pride comes before the downfall, right? And the downfall is if society is too proud, it collapses. If it's arrogant, if it thinks its way is correct, it collapses because the environment changes and the society, the culture, for example, no longer fits the society, fits the environment, sorry, and the environment just engulfs it and eventually collapses it. But when you're humble, you are recognizing that you are limited and you don't know that much. And there's always more to be learned. And you always need to learn more because the environment is always changing. For example, in business, if you're not keeping an eye on what your customers want, eventually the customers won't be coming to you anymore and you would have lost your business. There's something about that humility. It's the opposite of pride. And I know pride is called a Luciferian trait in Christianity, for example. And we all, I mean, you don't want to be there. So the opposite of it, humility, I think it's the cornerstone of wisdom, a cornerstone of wisdom, I think. Yeah.
And I think with pride, there's also this element of like, what's the word, like taking things for granted, right? Almost to an extent. I think nowadays we're seeing that being very much the case with a lot of people, especially younger people, sometimes myself included, and I'm sure the viewers as well, and I'm sure you as well. But that's probably why we're seeing and hearing that there's kind of a downfall in society, right? Everything is kind of going into this downwards trend, particularly now, maybe because of that kind of,
Yeah, we feel entitled.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'm also definitely guilty of that. And that is, if you're entitled, you're just blocking any kind of feeling of appreciation. And I mean, it's also disaligned with the truth of reality because you're not entitled to your possessions. You could have been born in a different family. One day your house might burn down and it wasn't insured. It doesn't take much for you to move from a state of having to a state of not having. So you really shouldn't be entitled because you're not entitled. It's not aligned with the nature of reality. And I think that's why it's humility, on the other hand, is so powerful. And also, what I think is humans have instinctually evolved to detect that humility because it is what makes the species survive. And that's why unconsciously people will root for you if you're humble. That's what I've sort of observed. And if you like, it's this combination. I especially experienced it during my internship. If you are humble, if you are curious, you want to learn and talk to people, and you also take the position of the student in a relationship with somebody that you want to learn, that you subordinate yourself in some sense to them. You say, you know more than me. And if you do that in every single situation, first of all, you'll learn stuff, but also people will like you, and not necessarily in an arrogant way. They'll be like, this I'm above this person, because they are my student. No. It's like people like instinctively want to help you. They root for you. Then they'll give you opportunities. That is, for example, for networking, so powerful and potent. That's what I've learned, at least.
Yeah, and I think when you approach any networking in that sense, or anybody in that way, I think they very quickly bring down their guards, right? It's not like it doesn't become a fight of peers, but it's more of, okay, the relationship is kind of non-toxic and not a fight to see who's superior and better or richer or whatever it is, but it's more of what can we both, because I guess it has to be mutual, what can we both learn from each other?
Yeah, nice. You remove the sort of I do a favor for you, you do a favor for me business mindset to a humane personal mindset. And if you show that you're ethically switched on, and also skepticism. super useful. If when you're talking to someone and you in your dialogue, you talk about how you're skeptical about, like, I've thought about, somebody offered me this opportunity, but I'm concerned that, um, you know, it might harm other people. I might be using them. People will love that. Not consciously love it, but they'll detect you as somebody who they can trust. That's it, because you have an ethical dialogue on your head. Your moral conscience is activated, and they like that because they can trust you then, and they want to work with you because you're not a risky asset. Because there's always, like, whenever you meet somebody new, there's the risk of this person hurting you. They're a danger. And when you can reduce that risk because this person is ethically switched on, you're like you're a risk-free kind of, or not risk-free, but low risk asset to have in your network. And I think that people want.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you can show that, yeah, I mean, it kind of, I think from my side, what's worked well, I'm sure it works well for you too, is if you can align yourself with, like what you said, the kind of business transaction, kind of networking usually doesn't work very well. But if you can make it more of a, what can I offer to you to, make sure that you win, rather than kind of expecting the other person to help you win in what you're trying to do, right? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Making sure that there's the alignment, with an objective, right? So that both parties win, and it's not just what can I extract from this person.
Yeah. First, go to them with an offering like you want to give them, instead of going to them and then sort of immediately sort of indicating that you want to use them for some reason. More like going to them is like, what can I learn from you? Like, what do you need help with? Sort of something like that.
And kind of making the part of the journey, right? If you're starting a business and you want to network with some people, you want them to be part of what you're trying to do, right? I mean, I don't
Yeah.
want to turn this into a business talk, because I think this is more of meaning of life, right? Philosophical talk. But yeah, I think you
Yeah.
get
You
what I mean.
mean don't yeah, I mean, it's what you said. Align interests. Don't have a conflict of, have like parallel interests, so you're in the same boat. You're clearly in the same boat. Make that clear. Yeah. Dope. Awesome. Let me see. Okay, next question. What do you think, Lorenzo, should adolescents work for or fight for in their 20s?